priest, man or woman, in Israel, representing Yahweh, had what? Their heads covered in their ministry. Do we have that settled?
Amen.
We have that settled?
Amen.
We can move on?
Move on.
MoveOn.org. Because you want to know something? If Rav Shaul said something that told returning Ephraimites to take off their head coverings and to have naked heads before Yahweh, we need to what? Disregard everything he said and stick by Torah and Yeshua. But before I get to there, I want you to turn to Matityahu 5:9. Edgar, I want you to. Matityahu 5:9. Matityahu 5:9. Tallits, Kippahs, and other so-called Jewish traditions.
Okay.
Matityahu, Matthew. Don't you just love it when the bishop gets up? Saint Matthew. Turn to Saint Matthew. Ah! That's like chalk on a blackboard in the classroom. Please leave me alone, darling. Remember when we were kids? The chalk on the blackboard? Saint Matthew. Well, if he's a saint, aren't I a saint? Aren't you a saint? Why put him on a pedestal? Go ahead and get quiet on me, see if I care. I'm sorry, make it Matityahu 4:9. Satan tries to tempt or test Yeshua in the wilderness.
Amen.
We're all familiar with this.
Amen.
Satan said, psst, 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 psst. Worship me. Worship me and I'll give you all the Melchutim of the Olam Hazeh, all the kingdoms of the world, if you just worship me. And here's how I want you to worship me, Mr. Messiah. Think you're so great? Think you're Joe Cool? Think you're Ghetto Bob? Here's how I want you to worship! Satan said to Yeshua, all these kingdoms will I give you if you fall down and worship me. How? By bearing naked your head to me. Meaning the only way you could worship demons is by having a bare head. Because Satan knew that a covered head is a sign of the worship, the true worship of Yahweh. And so Satan said, now here's how we do it, Mr. Son of Yahweh. You bow down to me, and when you bow down to me, you take off your head covering, and then we can do some business. But as long as your head is covered to your Heavenly Father, we cannot do any business.
Hey. Baruch Hashem. Hey.
And you know why you don't see it? And you know why people don't see it, Brother Darrell? Because only the Restoration Scriptures has restored that. Where do we find that? In the Matthew Shem Tov. A medieval Hebraic translation based on the original Hebrew translation that was in the Library of Alexandria, Egypt, according to the early church fathers. In the medieval copy of the Matthew Shem Tov, it says, if you worship me, bare your head and worship me. Only the Restoration Scriptures has this properly restored.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
Toda Rabba Yahweh. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. So, all these things will I give you, Yeshua, if you bear your head. If you don't bear your head, you will not worship me. You are submitted to your Father. But if you bear your head, take off your head covering, I will give you something favorable. All the kingdoms of this world. Did Yeshua wear a head covering?
Yes.
That was Satan's trick. Not just worship me. If you bare your head and worship me, then I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world. Now let me think this through. So if Yeshua knew that it was dangerous to not wear a head covering, and it was a sign of falling prey to the trap of Satan, so I'm not going to fall prey to his trap. I'm going to keep my head covering on. What about us? Remember Isaiah 3? I will make your forehead naked. I'll remove the plate. I'll remove the covering because you are under my judgment. But if we're not under his judgment, what ought we to do? Keep on our head covering. Is anybody with me?
With you.
Does that blow you away?
Amen.
Listen, Yeshua. Now, why did Satan want Yeshua to take off his head covering? Because if he did, we would say, oh, if Yeshua took off his head covering, we could take off our head covering. And then we're right back to our Ephraimite forefathers who were not allowed to wear a head covering or carry the name of Yahweh because they were under Yahweh's judgment and they were under Yahweh's disfavor. Amen, somebody?
Amen.
Amen.
And what did Yahweh say in Jeremiah chapter 10? Do not learn the way of the heathen. Don't study their way. Study Yeshua. In the face of temptation, he kept his head covered. In the face of pressure from your wife, from your church, from your bishop, from your pastor, you keep your head covered. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm not saying you've got to wear it all the time at home. That's between you and Yahweh. Because people could start to think we're Muslims. And I don't want that either. I don't think that brings glory to Yahweh either if people think we're Muslims. So you've got to come to an even balance on this thing. You've got to come to a healthy balance. And be honest and ask yourself, is my head covering Hebraic, or can I be mistaken for a Sunni or a Shiite? And answer that honestly. Only you can answer that. You know? Not picking on anybody or any three people, I'm just telling you a fact. No, I'm serious. Not picking on anybody. That's one of the reasons I didn't wear that anymore. Because to me, maybe not to somebody else, I didn't want to be confused with Muslim.
Amen.
But we still should, especially in assembly. I mean, what you do is between you and Yahweh. But when it comes to assembly, you ought to have your head covered, men, women. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Okay? What about Paul? So Yeshua said, keep your head covered. Ezekiel said, keep your head covered. Isaiah kept his head covered. Aaron kept his head covered. All the Kohanim kept their head covered. But Pablo dice, 1 Corinthians 11, what did Paul say? Ouch.
Keep your head covered.
And boy, does the devil use this.
Oh, yeah.
Corinthians Aleph. Doesn't matter what 65 prophets said. If we can somehow believe that Paul rebuked men and women from wearing head coverings, then we got a problem. Are we on?
We're on.
We're on.
Should we quit now?
No.
Teach.
Huh?
No.
Teach, Rabbi.
Miss Brooks, should I quit?
No.
Pablo, Paul. So we understand that whatever Paul said cannot contradict everything we've been studying for the past hour. Would we agree with that?
Amen.
If Paul contradicts everything we've been studying throughout the Bible, then we have no choice but to discard the writings of Paul. Now, I'm not saying that. Don't you dare misquote me. Don't you dare. I didn't say Paul's writings are not scripture. I'm saying, if it can be proven that he tells us to disobey the Torah on how to conduct ourselves as priests before Yahweh, we must remove his writings because they're the only ones that contradict. But I submit to you, it is our understanding that needs to be adjusted, not his writings.
Amen.
Amen.
Our understanding of his
Amen.
writings is what needs to be adjusted. Let's try to understand him quickly, because I have a lot to cover. Verse, Corinthians Aleph, chapter 11. 1 Corinthians 11. Be imitators of me as I am of Mashiach. Meaning, whatever Mashiach does, I do. We just read in Matthew 4:9 that Mashiach ministered to Yahweh with his head covered. He said, so I imitate him, and that's why you ought to imitate me. Do I need to go over this again? I imitate him. I stand against the devil like he did, with my head covered as a priest and king in the commonwealth of Israel. Imitate me, child of Yahweh, Paul says, even as I imitate him.
Wow. Hallelujah. Amen.
Now I praise you, Israelite brother, that you remember me in all these things that I imitate Yeshua. And all the things that I imitate Yeshua, you remember what I do. Praise Yahweh that you hold me in such high esteem. And you keep the Chukim and the Mishpatim as I have delivered them to you. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Mashiach. And the head of the woman is the man, and the head of the Mashiach is Yahweh. Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
If every man making prayers, tefillot, or prophesying having his head covered, dishonors his head. Ouch. And here's what we got to deal with. But you are here for training. I don't want you to go back to the religious crowd and get into an argument and not know how to defend yourself. You're here for training.
Amen.
Turn to your neighbor and say, I want my training wheels off.
I want my
Training
training
wheels
wheels
off.
off.
Come on now.
Teach. We're hungry
Come on now.
for the
It appears
word.
we're in trouble.
For the word.
It appears that Rav Shaul is saying any man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. Some people say that a man should not pray with a head covering, because Paul says no. Michael Rood and the group in Israel says no, 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 no. This is what it means. It's not talking about head coverings per se. It means this. Mister, pay attention now, because as you can see, I'm coming after you. Mister, if you submit to Rabbi Moshe, and he becomes your mentor, or any other man other than Messiah, you have covered your head with a covering other than the Messiah. You ever hear that one?
Yeah.
That's coming out of Michael Rood's ministry. Meaning, Messiah is your head, not Moshe Konachowski, not Rivka Konachowski. Messiah is your head. And no man should cover his head with anything but the Messiah. This is what's being taught. Well, if that's true, how could Paul say, imitate me?
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
If that's true, then why would Paul steal Yahshua's glory and say, imitate me, as I imitate Yeshua? But I'm not done. I'm just getting started.
Hallelujah.
So Michael Rood says that the man is the priest of the home, and there should be nothing interfering with his headship, Messiah, just like Yeshua has nothing interfering with his headship, the Father. Sounds good. Sounds very good. And Michael Rood is a good friend of mine, or he was. But it sounds good. Let's be honest. Makes sense. It's only one problem. It violates the first law of biblical hermeneutics.
Hallelujah.
The first law is who talks to whom.
Amen.
Who's talking to whom?
Amen.
A Jewish rabbi is talking to a heathen congregation that's got nothing right. Sex in the altar, sex in the pews, mother-in-law sleeping with daughter-in-laws, lesbianism is rampant, talking in tongues instead of celebrating Shabbat. They got it all screwed up.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
They're a carnal congregation.
Uh-huh.
A carnal Kehillah. So, in this Corinthian Athenian culture, whenever the male prostitutes wanted to solicit business, they would veil their face. Remember, the first law of Bible hermeneutics. Who's talking to who? Who's talking to who? A Jewish rabbi is talking to Athenians and Corinthians who go shopping, and when they go shopping, they also shop for lesbian and homosexual activity. And the male prostitutes in those pagan temples would veil their face, put on their makeup, and go, "Hi, honey." Then they'd get saved, come into the congregation, and act the same way, and dress the same way. Stay with me. So the actual Aramaic or Greek, take your pick, it reads the same way. Verse 4 reads as follows. Every man praying or prophesying with a head covering and a hang-down veil dishonors Yeshua, because you're acting like a gay boy instead of like a priest. He's not against head coverings. He's against the kind of head coverings that have a veil that allow you to be open for business. So these men were coming to the congregation, instead of having the turban or a head covering that was honest and upright before Yahweh, would have a covering that used the same veil that they used in the marketplace, in the pagan temples, to pick up homosexual customers. Now they're getting saved, and they haven't changed their wardrobe. I said they haven't changed their wardrobe. Verse 5. But every man who makes tefillot or prophesies, prays or prophesies, with her head uncovered, same thing, dishonors her head. It's as if she was shaved. How did the women, the butches, how did they pick up the butchettes? In debauchery. Debauchery. They did the opposite. The men grew hair and had a nice veil. Hi, honey, I'm a queen. The ladies did the opposite. The ladies shaved their head and got picked up for pagan worship. There was complete disorder. Listen to me, and you will praise Yahweh for what I'm telling you. Don't get into another conversation without being prepared how to answer this. Why do you guys wear head coverings? Know your stuff and stuff your know. Where are we? Where are we? What this whole thing is has nothing to do with head coverings, big head coverings, small head coverings. No! Man, we're taking their pagan temple wardrobe and coming into the assembly cross-dressing. Women were taking their pagan assembly wardrobe, coming into the assembly cross-dressing. Yes, rather, this is a Torah prohibition against cross-dressing. This has nothing to do with wearing a yarmulke like the church wants you to believe. This is a prohibition against cross-dressing, because it is written, a man shall not wear that which pertains to a woman, and a woman shall not wear that which pertains to a man. That's why we're into dresses. That's why I want you coming in here in tight pants. Because if you want to wear tight pants in the world, ladies, go for it. Even though you shouldn't be doing that either. There can't be any gender confusion. How are we going to be priests when we have gender confusion? Well, I'm getting some holy looks now. I know what I'm doing. There's a method to my madness. I like looking at women just like you do. And I'm not here to look at women. I'm here to look at Yahweh. Wow, what a radical concept. I don't trust myself. Do you trust your flesh? The word of Yahweh says we have no confidence in the flesh. Members of the opposite sex should not enter your house if your husband's not home, if your wife's not home.
Hallelujah!
Amen.
Rivka and I had a little tiff the other day because I had a massage therapist coming over to give me a massage and she wasn't back shopping and I was very uncomfortable. I'm just going to move on now. I'm going nowhere that fast.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know. Just move on.org. All right. So if the woman does not have a head covering, she dishonors Yeshua because she also is a priest and a king, obviously positionally. For if a woman does not have her head covered, verse 6, let her be shaved. But if it's a shame for her to cross-dress and be shaved, go ahead and let her be covered in the assembly. For a man should not veil his head because he's the image of Yahweh. And the woman is the image of man. And then it goes on. We can't do the whole thing. Then Rachel goes down to verse 14. Nature sets doctrine. Verse 14. Nature determines doctrine. In other words, the Torah says a woman who is menstruating should not come into the assembly. How many men are going to lose sleep because of the fact that they're menstruating and they cannot come into the assembly? In other words, know your gender. How do we know the doctrine? How do we know our gender? Right here, nature. Doesn't nature teach you that if a woman prays unveiled, it's wrong? If a man prays veiled, it's wrong? If a man has long hair, it's a shame. If a woman has long hair, it's her tiferet. It's given to her for a covering. So in other words, nature teaches that, what? Nature teaches that women should have their head covered because just look at your hair. Yahweh gave it to you for a what? Study your hair, ladies, to know if you should wear a head covering. Study your hair. It's obvious nature wants you to have your head covered in the assembly. Men, likewise, watch. Men ought to cover their heads like Ezekiel, like Isaiah, like Aharon, like the Kohanim, pero lo like los locos in the marketplace at Corinth. Meaning, all Israel should have their head covered, but men don't veil. That veil belongs to the ladies. A man should not pray or prophesy with his face veiled. A woman should not pray or prophesy with a bare head. Doesn't nature teach you Yahweh doesn't want you ladies to be bare? Have your head covered. Men, have your head covered like Ezekiel, but not like the prostitutes in the Corinthian marketplace. Now it makes sense. We have been misinterpreting Paul and ascribing to him a contradiction that goes against every other book of the Bible. Which is why the church is in the shape that it's in. The first, this is how they do Bible study. Ready? We start with 1 Thessalonians, and then 1 Timothy, and then Galatians. Why? ¿Qué dice Pablo? That is the foundation of all their Bible study. Not what did Genesis say? What does Exodus say? What does Isaiah say? And then we got to make sure that Peter, Paul, James, John are speaking according to the testimony of the first covenant. And if it appears that they're not talking according to the testimony of the first covenant, we are misunderstanding Paul. We are misunderstanding Paul. You know, Christianity indicts itself against the prohibition for men to wear head coverings. You know how? Buy any Christian movie. You ever see a Christian movie about Paul? You ever rent a Christian movie?
Yeah.
About Paul?
Yeah.
I have. Have you ever rented a movie?
Yeah.
What is Paul wearing?
Head cover.
Head covering.
Have you ever seen a single biblical movie where Paul had a bare head?
No.
So they know it. They know Paul wore a head covering. So how can they twist his words and say that he doesn't want the men to wear a head covering when he wore a head covering and he said, verse 1, imitate me as I imitate Yeshua.
Man, doesn't make sense.
Are we on?
We're on.
So should women wear head coverings?
Yes.
Yes.
Should men wear head coverings?
Yes.
Yes. But not the same. Man, you can wear socks. Stock your socks, but don't you wear stockings. In other words, that was Halloween. Men can have leg coverings, but not nylons. But they both can have leg coverings. I play golf, I cover my legs. So this whole thing has absolutely zero to do with men and women wearing head coverings. It is cross-dressing rampant in this carnal congregation, and Rashul said, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stop this carnality right here and right now. The word of Yahweh is so simple. If we just receive it, it's so simple. If I'm wrong, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say I'm wrong, and Paul is forbidding men from wearing head coverings. Then understand one thing. We have a Jewish rabbi who is telling Torah-keeping, Bible-believing men not to cover their head in contradiction of Ezekiel, Isaiah, Moshe Rabbeinu, and every priest of Israel who's ever ministered for Yahweh. We have one man crying in the wilderness, Paul, and everybody else crying in unison as echad with one voice saying, cover your head, and Paul saying, no, we're under grace, don't cover your head. And if that's the case, then your understanding is wrong. How can Paul be sent by Yahweh and not confirm what he told Ezekiel, what he told Isaiah? And irony of ironies, every biblical movie has Paul wearing a head covering. If you really believe men should not wear head coverings, you need to reproduce your movies. And you want to know the truth? Can I get down dirty honest with you? Can I be really upfront and frank with you? Or Doris with you? If the three boys in Babylon wore head coverings, if every priest of Israel wore a head covering, if Ezekiel wore a head covering, and Yahweh said that bare heads are a sign of judgment and disfavor, and Paul said, Moshe Konichowski, don't wear a head covering, I will gladly, yes, even arrogantly, disobey Paul. Because I will never go against the Torah of Yahweh.
Hallelujah.
But thankfully, that's not the case. Thankfully, I don't have to disobey Paul. I have to be humble enough to change my understanding. Because what is Kippah? What did Peter say in 2 Peter 3:16? Let's turn there and see why we think he said what he didn't say. I'll be preaching for a long time, so please get comfortable. That would have been a good place to say, amen, brother.
Amen. I'm comfortable.
Kippah bed. Some of these folks on the Yadi Radio Network are tithing $300-400 a week. I want to give them their money's worth. I'm not going to never contradict the other writings. Peter said in all Paul's letters, speaking in those things, some things are very hard to understand, but those who are unlearned and those who are unstable twist his words along with the other Kitvei HaKadosh scriptures for their own destruction. If you think Yahweh allows his priests to be bald-headed and naked before him without carrying the sign of ordination into the ministry, the head covering, and the sign of coronation into his kingship, the gold plate of Yahweh's name on the forehead. If you think Yahweh wants his people to minister to him that way, you're twisting Paul's words because they are hard to understand. And if they twist Paul's words, rest assured, they're twisting some of the other scriptures as well.
Baruch
In other words,
Hashem
look at me,
Yahweh.
because some of you are new, you've never heard me say this. Those of you who have been with me, and we've been suffering together as Echad for many years, have heard me say this before. Paul's letters are there not to confuse you, but to test you on how mature you are in the things of Yahweh. Because everybody
Amen.
understands Torah. Keep Shabbat, go to sleep and rest. But not everybody understands Paul. Those who are unlearned and unstable wrestle with his writings. They don't think they're as inspired as the other writings for their own destruction. Meaning they disqualify themselves as priests if they bare their heads in nakedness before Yahweh. So why are Paul's letters so confusing? Why are they so difficult to understand? They're there. Yahweh left them there to test your maturity. Are you learning,
Baruch Hashem
or
Yahweh.
are you unstable and easily deceived? That's why they're there. They're a litmus test of where you are in the things of Yahweh. So if you struggle with anything Paul said, that's why they're there. To make you struggle to show that what he said ultimately is what Moses said and nothing different.
Hallelujah.
And if you see them as contradictory, then Yahweh says you have to learn and become more stable and stop destroying